Aloha, this is Dan. Back during the original run of the Musicast segment of this podcast from 2011 to 2013, my co-hosts and I found it difficult to stick to strictly music-only topics because, well, we're equally big fans of all types of media. So, we sometimes find ourselves venturing into discussions about movies as well as music. To get this Moviecast segment of the podcast up and running, I have separated out those movie-specific discussions as the first episode. New content is also on the way. To start off, here's a rant from our very first episode of Musicast published on October 15th, 2011 that was part of a larger discussion about Rob Zombie as an artist.
And then in his films, okay, sorry metalheads out there, because, you know, you guys all drool over like Devil's Rejects and everything, but I don't like his films. I like the way they look. I like the aesthetics, but I think like
I don't like them either.
His movies, they're so predictable because, you know, it's just like, okay, there's a bunch of horrible people and horrible stuff's gonna happen to these people. It's like, you know, what else you got, Rob? You know, is that the furthest depths that you can go into the human experience is like horribleness? Come on. I mean, don't even get me started on what he did with Halloween. You know, okay, I'm gonna start because I'm just gonna say because it's rant time. The whole thing that made Michael Myers scary in the first place was that you had no idea like who he really was or what his real motivation was and why he couldn't die. He was mysterious. He was like the embodiment of evil, which I think is way more evil than a stupid serial killer, which is what he turned him into. And he had a rough childhood and he sacrificed animals and he was abused and blah, blah, blah. And then he becomes a serial killer. You know, that's not what Michael Myers was supposed to be. That's why I thought he was such a, you know, scary bad guy. And then he just becomes like Jeffrey Dahmer or something. And it's just, I thought that was really lazy writing of Rob's. Like I didn't appreciate it.
This next discussion was from a Musicast episode published on September 27th, 2012, where our co-hosts and I discussed a series of movies that we saw over the summer of 2012.
Let's talk about movies a little bit. Let's move on from the music, even though we can mention the music of the movies if we want. But they're the big three, even though lots of big movies came out this summer, of course. But there are three that I really wanted to touch on, if you guys don't mind, because they all had a different. They all hit me in different ways, and I thought they were worth a conversation. The first one was Prometheus, which I don't know if it did as well as was expected, especially because it was supposed to be, you know, connected with Alien and everything, and Ridley Scott being the director. But that movie really stuck with me, even though it, you know, came out at the beginning of the summer, and it was, you know, obviously very controversial, and there was a lot of talk about, you know, about like how connected it was going to be with Alien, and like was it a direct prequel or not, and you know, Ridley Scott like kept saying it wasn't going to be, but then of course there was that supposed like twist ending or surprise ending, which I wasn't surprised about at all, because when the girl like aborted or had the C-section for the face hugger, I was like, oh, there's a face hugger, it's gonna get somebody at some point, like, and then so then I knew we were gonna see an alien, and I knew that, you know, I didn't think it was gonna be one of the space jockeys, but I like the fact that happened. Like, people were all over the internet and in reviews and podcasts, people were like, what was with that crazy twist ending? That was so stupid. I didn't, you know, like, why do they I didn't think it was a twist at all. It was like, there's so much we could say about it. I mean, there's so much to talk about and so much to debate and try to figure out, and it's like, you know, talking about Lost or something, but in the end, like, it's like Lost because it was co-written by Damon Lindelof, of course, but it's a movie that had huge, major problems. It was like big plot holes, if you could look at it like that. My biggest problem with it was the characters were complete crap. They were like the most lazy, empty, one-dimensional characters. And some of the lines in there, like when the guy's like, the captain of the ship is talking to Charlize Theron, and says, he's just like, "Are you a robot?" And it's just like the dumbest delivery of lines and just so bad. There's another line that the robot, that the android David says later in the movie. What, I can't remember what it was now, but it was just awful. But the thing is that like none of that bothered me at all, because the movie itself, I thought like the plot and the themes were so compelling. And I only saw it once, I gotta admit that. So maybe just seeing it once, like maybe if I saw it again I'd hate it. I don't know. But the one time I saw it, I was totally compelled. I was like, this movie is more of like an reading a really thick essay or something, as opposed to being like a piece of entertaining material. And I kind of equate it to listening to Eminem, who I don't always like or agree with everything that he says. Sometimes it downright disgusts me, the things that he talks about, but it's always compelling. It's shocking, it gets your attention. There's so much hyperbole, and like it's just so in your face that like you can't help but like at least pay attention to it, if not enjoy it just for its compelling nature. And I felt like that about Prometheus, where like it was like disgusting and violent, and it was like nonsensical, and things happened for like seemingly no reason, and the characters did things for no reason and said things for no reason, and like, but it just didn't matter, because I just wanted to see what was going to happen next. And like just the bigger picture stuff I thought was so interesting about the essence of mankind, and like why were we put here, and like were we just part of like some bigger scheme that we were just like a expendable afterthought to like these space jockeys that had a much bigger plan for things and whatever. I found it to be like and also this is the only movie that I've seen in 3D so far that really wowed me, and not because of like the pop out effect or anything, but just because the landscape and the photography was so gorgeous. I think they shot it mostly in Iceland. It was just so stark and so bleak and so wide, the wide angle lenses they use, and I just thought it was just gorgeous to behold. And like the sets, people complained about the sets for some reason, and they thought they were bad, but like there's only really 3 sets, right? There was like the outdoor area, the spaceship, and then the indoor of the bunker thing, and that was it. I mean, but people were like about the sets being really like lame and borrowed from other things, but I thought they were like gorgeous. I don't know. So Prometheus, what did you think, Chris?
I admired what it was trying to do at times more than I liked or admired the movie as a whole. I initially liked, like I said, the whole epic kind of question of humanity's origin. It definitely had the flavor of the old school science fiction pulp stuff, and definitely the visuals and the landscape were amazing. I mean, I definitely think one of the downfalls came with, it definitely felt like Ridley Scott's original new idea shoved into, let's tie this back with the alien stuff.
Unnecessary, right?
Right. Like, it really should have just been its own unique, different story instead of a prequel to the Alien movies. But one of the best sum-ups that I think came from the Patton Oswalt, the comedian.
Oh, yeah.
An actor, where he did a different video. It was a video of him completely eviscerating Star Wars The Phantom Menace, where he basically sums it up at the end. You have Darth Vader, this completely iconic, amazing imagery, character of evil, and then we find out through this prequel that he's just a whiny teenager and a weirdly happy kid. It's the same thing with the aliens. Like, the aliens are really hardcore. I don't need to know how and why they're created. They're more interesting as just being these aliens that look really creepy and can kill you 50 million ways flat.
Well, and it's kind of scarier, not the mystery about them.
Yeah.
Like not knowing where they came from makes it, which is my argument about like the whole like ruining of like Michael Myers and making him into a serial killer, like I talked about in the first episode of the podcast, where Rob Zombie took him and just made him into like a generic serial killer, or any movie like the Saw movies where they like Jigsaw became this like stupid, like punchline of a serial killer, where like the whole idea of like somebody locking 2 people in a room. I thought the first movie I thought was really interesting, and then like not knowing why they were there, or what their connection was, or who did this to them, made it really interesting until, in my opinion, like Saw what became completely irrelevant. Like once we found out who the killer was, and then it's like, I don't know, it gave too much, you know, it just gave you too much. It took away the scare factor, because isn't fear mostly derived from what the unknown, like what you don't know?
Right.
Why people are so afraid of death and things, you know, like because it's the unknown, and people are scared of the dark because they can't see what's out there, and you know, and I totally agree with you on that one. Like the whole prequel idea, you know, to something that was originally so scary kind of takes away its steam. But and that was kind of one thing I appreciated about the movie, was I thought Ridley Scott did that on. I think Ridley Scott made it on purpose to be a discussion movie. Like I think he was trying to make it more than just simple entertainment, and I appreciated that, even though like obviously it worked to various degrees depending on your perspective and context. But Dave, what'd you think?
I was into it the first time I saw it. I saw it twice, and it was. I was into it both times. I mostly for the return to the Ridley Scott alien type feel, and the sort of industrial sci-fi, or that like late 80s kind of noir vibe of sci-fi, which I love so much. I think it was the best sci-fi ever, but at least with cinematic. But you know, when I came to think of it, it wasn't like great. It was all the whole discussion of the origins of the universe, and or origins of life, and that's supposedly leading the guy. Was kind of like, I didn't really care.
Really?
I just wanted to create the alien, you know, and then that was entertaining enough, and I don't know, as far as it went, it was a thriller. It was kind of see it then now. You don't really think about things. You're just kind of like, oh, so that's where aliens come from. That's where aliens came from, you know.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool, and okay. It wasn't great. It was worth seeing for the cinematics and just the feel, but the atmosphere of it. But all in all, it wasn't like anything breakthrough, so I'm sort of neutral on it.
Yeah.
Two last things on it. I was really disappointed at the end when the face hugger bonded with the alien creator, because I honestly thought it was going to end up being that it bonded with us, with a human. Like I thought that would explain the humanoid structure to the aliens in the later ones.
Yeah, I thought that was the thing. I thought like with alien, like I thought that the point of the aliens was that they took on characteristics of the beings that they gestated with. But I mean, I guess the space jockey was humanoid as well, so.
Yeah. And secondly, have you guys seen Dark City yet?
No, I haven't.
Next time the three of us get in a room, we're watching that.
You're not the only one to say that. I know I need to see it. The next one I want to touch on is it might be a little controversial, but I think it'll make for good conversation. But I gotta get it out there to the world how I felt about Brave. But I'm gonna let you guys go first. And I've been stewing on this for a long time, and I didn't see it again. So you know, this is all based on my one time viewing, but I almost feel like I don't need to see it again to go. But why don't you guys talk about Brave first? So Dave, how'd you feel about Brave?
Brave was, you know, the hooks for that movie was the setting and the fantastic music. It seemed like it was going to be fantastic, and ended up being just kind of mediocre. Like, I don't know, something about that. The mother turning the bear thing didn't just seem to do it. I felt like there was going to be, you know what? Sometimes it happens in a movie where you see the preview, you see the trailer, and you feel like there's going to be this bigger adventure. It's like you can make an adventure in some other, it's longer, all stuff's going to happen, and it ends up being just this more contained story, and you're just kind of like, oh, that's it. That's how I felt with it. So I was like, I thought some big thing was going to change when she, you know, was cursed or something, or change her fate, and there's going to be this big, huge adventure goes from there, with all these places, all this stuff happens, you know, like Odyssey here. And what happened was, her mother turned into a f***ing bear, she had to remedy it, and there we were. Okay, it's kind of the full self-contained thing. And a lot of, and you know, and it's not true to the beauty of a lot of the. Actually, this is a theme that runs throughout the really the good Pixar films where it starts out with a small spot, and then these things like blossom from there. This huge adventure. Just think of any of the ones that are the notable ones. This didn't seem to have that. It seemed like it had the potential. That's why I was so excited when I saw the previews for it, but it didn't go there. It was so self-contained. I felt, and just I wanted a Lord of the Rings. I just wanted this adventure to blossom from how it was set up, and it didn't fulfill my expectations of a wider story. So it was kind of forgettable.
Chris?
I liked it more than you guys did. To me, it was a pretty good movie, which in the Pixar pantheon equates to being a good Pixar movie. I don't think it was one of the best ones, but to me, it just took a kind of classical fairy tale structure and applied that kind of logic to it. Just with there's all kinds of greater symbolism cast upon it, with I think definitely with everything going on with women's rights and politics these days, that definitely kind of in some ways for both better and for worse overshadowed that, since the main character was the first Pixar heroine. But to me, at the core, it took a classical fairy tale structure and did the Pixar mold on it, where it was about two people who are kind of disconnected coming to a realization with each other. It actually reminds me very much of Finding Nemo, where in there you had the father and the son learning to trust each other and learning to listen to each other. And I felt like Brave did the same thing with the mother and the daughter and the mother, where they had to kind of just learn to listen to each other and understand where each other, with their individual beliefs and choices, were coming from. So I don't know. That was I liked it as a pretty good Pixar movie.
Chris, can you speak to the thing that sparked the most controversy over it for us was that article that you had shared about the author that touted it as a great film because of the symbolism and the female, and then what was your take on that again? Can you remind us?
The Ethel Rohan, she's a Irish originally short story writer, and she just basically, like I said, in that whole vein of the movie, struck a larger worldview political chord, where she basically, like a lot of other people, she saw Merida, yeah. She saw her as a kind of the first child's movie heroine that really kind of struck a chord for women's rights and individual women's beliefs, and she tied that into her own personal experiences of the traumas she suffered in her life and the trauma suffered in other women's lives. And so it definitely became a live wire of, some people definitely took it very personally in a kind of cathartic, art as a catharsis way, which, I think if you interpret that for yourself individually in a positive way, that's nothing but good. And obviously some people will have different reactions.
Yeah, well, no, but I think you hit the point that I was trying to remember what you had made about why she felt the need to defend it so much against a lot of the detractors.
But then, the point that you made, someone like Ripley being an equal, female heroine.
Yeah, or Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2, yeah.
Right, well, yeah, or Linda Hamilton, and definitely agree with that, yeah. But just...
And I understand, I think you're totally right, you can't, as a child, you're not going to connect with those characters, of course.
Right, exactly, yeah, they're the adults.
And you know what, and honestly, I can't make it offense for what I had said before, about her, me disagreeing with her based on that idea, because I can't think of any other young lady heroines off the top of my head that play the similar role as her, but I feel like not, especially on the Disney World, because in Disney World they're always like spoiled princesses, that whatever, which Merida was as well. So in that regard, I'm still a little foggy on that whole thing, because I feel like she's not the only female. Well, I guess in the other Disney films, though, no. See, there's like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and things like those were leading females that that had similar, but then they were saved by men.
Just having watched the Disney's Beauty and the Beast, I think Belle from that was definitely kind of like, she was a midway point between like all the other previous princesses who sat around and waited for the prince to come, and Mira from the Brave.
Well, but I think Disney, like comparing that, or to Disney's credit, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, because Disney princesses always need to be saved by some white knight. But I feel like there's like in all of the stories and media and narratives that have been written since the beginning of time, like there's got to be a young woman that has a much more substantial story to tell than Merida. I like, it just feels weird to me to think that, even though like I said, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it feels very strange to think that like in 2012 was the first time that we've had a young woman stand up for herself, against a bigger plight, and societal shackles and things like that. But
I will say Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
But that was a Spanish language, either PG-13 or R-rated movie. But that's just the first thing that comes to mind.
Obviously, yeah, Brave is way more accessible to younger women, and I applauded for that, and I think, and I'm gonna kind of like, I'm gonna take what both of you guys said to make my point, but like, I can see where like both of you guys are coming from, and I understand, and I don't want to fault Pixar for making a little bit more of a standard Disney kind of film, especially since they're owned by Disney now.
They did make Cars,
but I loved the original Cars. I didn't see Cars 2 on purposely, because I like Cars 2 aside. Like, and I thought Dave made a good point, and Dave and I have talked about this before, where we like critics like Roger Ebert more than a lot of other critics, because they tend to focus on what the movie is and what it did, as opposed to complaining or criticizing it for not living up to expectations that they had for it, because then you're not really critiquing the film. You're upset because the film didn't live up to your expectations. And I think Brave, the reason that it had the kind of reaction it did for me and like Dave and a lot of other people, I think, like that author that you were talking about, Chris, that was responding to a lot of the criticism, was responding to criticism based on expectations that people had for the movie. But the reason that I feel more justified like criticizing Pixar in this regard, as opposed to like other movies that that have been disappointing because you thought they would be better, like Prometheus. The reason I like Prometheus because I didn't really have any expectations for it, and even if I did, like, I feel like it really was just Ridley Scott's thing, and that it didn't. It really, like, you got to look at it for what it is, not what you wanted it to be, because a lot of people wanted it to be a lot of things, but it really wasn't anything. But Pixar, the problem with Pixar, I think, is that they have created a very unique kind of niche for themselves. That and I actually just read this really interesting article sent to me by this guy at my school, that this article was written for the Harvard Business Review, but it was about. It was talking to the CEO of Pixar, and he was talking about Pixar as a business, how they cultivate it as a creative environment, as opposed to just being, like a normal production company business. And it was just very interesting, the things he had to say about the way that they treat their employees, the kind of freedoms that they give them, the kind of structure that they give them, the kind of intentional lack of structure that they give them, and all that kind of stuff. So Pixar is a very unique company. It's like Apple or something, where you expect when they release something, you expect the finest. They have created that expectation, as opposed to like a film like Prometheus, which was based on work that Ridley Scott had done 30 years or more ago. And he even came out in interviews and said, don't expect this to be what you think it's going to be, because it's not a prequel to Aliens, or to Alien, and like, so, but Pixar, they have created an expectation that they are going to be different, and that they are going to be higher quality, and they're going to be more thought out. They're going to be less pop culture-y. They're going to be much more like creative and unique and artistic, and intentional about what they create. And they're always going to be pushing the envelope, because they're not trying to just churn out films to make money. I mean, the CEO said that, like, we started as a creative entity, and that's what we still see ourselves as something that they're always developing new software for every film. They're always trying to, because they started out as a they weren't a film production company. They were a computer software company. That's how they started out, and they were originally started up by Steve Jobs. So they had that kind of thing. So in context of all that, like, I feel like Pixar, I feel justified, at least, in critiquing them based on expectations that I have for them, because so far, like, they've lived up to that standard that they created for themselves. Like, we didn't create that standard for them. I don't think anybody's created expectations for Pixar that aren't based on expectations that Pixar has already established as true for themselves. You know what I mean?
Like, all the other Pixar movies have kind of given us almost like new worlds, like living toys, the whole undersea world,
talking rats and robots. Yeah.
Right. The fact that this was the first one that had humans solely as the main characters.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Did that have any influence, or?
To me, it didn't bother me at all. I don't care through what vehicle they want to tell their stories, as long as their stories are top notch. So, as a disclaimer, like, obviously I was a screenwriting student, and the craft of story is very important to me as an audience member. I'm very interested in, just like, when we talk about songs and songs being well written, and I can appreciate a song of a genre that I may not like for being a very well written song, which is why I've gotten into so many different genres that I didn't used to be into. It's the same with with films. Like, I don't care if it's supposed to be a kids movie or family movie, or like a like a really violent rated R movie or horror movie, romantic comedy. I don't care about that as much as, like, if it's a really good story with really engaging characters, then I'm on board. Like, I don't. So in this regard, so for Pixar's, in context of Pixar, like, I felt like they have been doing that, almost like impeccably all the way through. With some missteps along the way, minor, but like, so in terms of, like, I can go on all about, like, the nitpicky stuff about the movie that didn't work. Disappointed me based on expectations that I had for it. Like Dave was saying, I thought it was going to be this epic film, and I just I felt, because of, like, the imagery and the you're talking about, like, ancient Scottish history. There's just so much to tell there, and there's such an interesting world to draw from.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and the music was so big, and the theme, fate. That's huge. Like there's all these expectations are created around that film that had nothing to do with the actual plot of the film. That was really, like, a big letdown for me, because of what I just said. I mean, just the scope, the expectations of the scope of it, I just thought were, like, a big letdown. Like, I didn't feel like it had to be a big story. But like you said about Nemo being very similar, I agree. Except that Nemo, like Dave was saying, was a huge adventure. It was a very small family story, but it took them through, like, thousands of miles of the ocean, and all these different characters, and all these interesting, like, set pieces, and, like, it felt really big as a film. Like, it was a big story, or I'm sorry, it was a big plot that told a very small personal story. Brave was a small story told with a very small, limited plot.
I'm gonna say, like, my final freaking last bit on this, but I almost wonder now, after having talked about all this, if they were ultimately too bound by the traditions of the fairy tale idea.
Yeah.
And also, if they, at some point when they were doing this, and, one of Pixar's genius has always been to kind of meld the traditional adventure fairy tale narrative that Disney perfected to a more modern sensibility. Yeah. If they did kind of realize the other gender appeal of this movie and the tie it would have to a modern audience, and if that became kind of so entrenched to something that was a bit different from the original narrative, I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll have Brave 2 and 3 to answer that. But
and going on from the scope, though, I just think that there was just some very basic storytelling elements, like storytelling 101 kind of stuff, that were kind of glaring missteps, which I just didn't quite understand because they've always been so good with this stuff in the past, which include, like, aside from the mother as a bear thing I thought was just kind of dumb, but I understood from what, your assessment of it, Chris. Like, I can see, the value of that plot device. But in general, I thought the movie was just, like, regardless of the plot of it, I thought it was lacking some just very basic things like stakes. Like, I understand, when we talked about before, how you said that the girl, for her, in her context and watching it as a young person who's might feel very similar to her, where you feel like you're a kid and you can't get your way and adults control your life, that feels like really big stakes. Like your life is just, you're never going to get to be independent. You're always going to be under someone's thumb. But and maybe kids connected with that, but like as a film, and if you look at the past Pixar repertoire, like they were really good about having a small story that could affect a larger thing. I mean, like WALL-E, saves the world, for all extensive purposes, and like Ratatouille, he like unites people and rats, and like there's always been like a bigger kind of thing going on, like an outside element that gives it a little bit more weight. And what and this almost had that because it had the other clans come in, but then they just became fodder for like fart jokes. Like the Merida really had there was no issue with those other clans, other than the fact that they all wanted to kill the bear.
Well, they were comic relief, yeah.
Yeah, like, and I felt like a missed opportunity where, like, Merida really, and the fact that the way that she kind of united them, I just felt was like really cheap, and it just felt like kind of tacked on, and so like I just felt like in general there was no other stakes for her other than her not getting. Well, basically it was like, what does she have to lose in this scenario? Well, in her mind, she had, it was either like freedom or imprisonment, right? But I don't know, like as an outside audience member, I felt like if she lost, she would still be a spoiled princess, and it wasn't that bad. I mean, it just, I like I said, like I can see why it could feel bad to that character and the kids that could relate to it, but like as a major motion picture, like I just felt like that wasn't enough. And then, or in terms of the stakes thing, I felt like there was really nothing else for her to lose, because like the father was an interesting misstep for me, because they established him really early on as a very reasonable person. Like when he talked to the mother and stuff, he was the sense of reason, and she was very like caught up in her own thing and not paying attention to other people's needs and sensibilities. But the father was very reasonable, and he was talking to her. He was able to kind of like talk to her like the mother. I mean, he was able to talk to her like an adult, and so the fact that like Merida was convinced that he was gonna like kill his mother as a bear, it didn't work for me, because they established the fact that bear had attacked him and he had a vendetta for that bear, but like all Merida needed to do was like shoot him in his other leg so he couldn't run, and then like hold him to the ground and like say, "Dad, you need to listen to me." Like I felt like that was really easy. It was just like they just didn't handle that very well, with the father being so like in this crazy nonsensical rage about trying to kill the bear, that and Merida being so powerless against him, who was established as a reasonable person from the beginning, it just felt like inconsistent that she wasn't able to do anything to get him to understand what was going on. So in that regard, like, I didn't feel like there was any real impending danger. And then the magic thing felt like totally had no context. It was just like they didn't explain like magic in this world, why it was important, like what it meant, like who could harness it or not. There just happened to be a witch, which is fine because it's a Disney movie, but then the witch just turned out to be comic relief too. She had no purpose other than to give the plot, she's a plot device. And so in that regard, I felt like the whole
Yeah. I did expect her to be more of like the ultimate villain
or something. Like she just did nothing. She just gave her that cake to eat, and like that was it. Like the whole magic thing I felt was like really inconsistent, and then there was no stakes around that really because we didn't understand the rules about magic. And that's the thing about fantasy is like, fantasy is fine. You guys know this, but like if you're gonna tell a fantasy story, the audience has to understand the rules. If they don't understand the rules of your fantasy world, they have nothing to relate it to, and they have no reason to care about if something doesn't go right because you don't know what the consequences are. So it's sort of like we're told that in a few days she could become a bear, but like why should we believe this crazy witch? This didn't work for me at all. I felt there was the fact that her mother might become a bear in a couple of days. It just like I didn't care at all. And you know what I mean? Like I felt like everything could have been done almost exactly the same, except they could have changed just a couple little things, and it could have made it an infinitely more engaging movie. And then like they had the evil bear guy show up at the end, and there was like that kind of like little twist about that this had happened before, but they didn't do anything with that. It was just sort of like that was not even a big revelation. It was just like, oh yeah, this had happened before, and we still have to kill this bear, and now he's dead, and then things are kind of back to normal. I thought like just the fact of like them killing the bear, I didn't think was that dangerous feeling because like that whole really long drawn out punchline of like the clans fighting amongst themselves in the dinner hall, it became like a slapstick scene, and they were fighting with weapons and things, but nobody got hurt. So I didn't feel like the violence aspect of it had any weight. Like I didn't feel like anybody was going to get hurt, and if they tried to kill the bear, like there's no reason to
the same weapon. Yeah, I do see that, what you definitely mean by that now, but...
Oh, that was the other... So the other screenwriting 101 thing that just didn't work for me in her character was I really didn't know what she really wanted. I knew what she didn't want, but in screenwriting school we learned that if you want to have a solid protagonist, they have to have a very clear want. Like they have to be after something. It doesn't have to be something tangible, but they just have to have a want that drives their motivations to the movie, and in that way you can relate to them, whether sympathetically or empathetically, and then you want to follow their story, and you relate to them, you want what they want, and but Merida, all we knew was what she didn't want. So and then what she did want was to change her fate, but we didn't know to what. You know what I mean? Like what was the alternative to her not being a princess? Because they established early in the movie that she was a very like free thinking adventurous girl, and like she was able to go out on her own all day. So okay, and then the big thing for me was the movie was called Brave, and I don't understand how Merida was really brave, other than on a very small level of learning. She got past her own BS to trust her mom and to love her mom, and be able to show her that, and to eventually save her, in the end and stuff. But like I didn't really feel like Merida really showed like true bravery at any one point where she was, because like at the end it was really her mom, and maybe that's what the title was referring to, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like I felt like the movie from the get-go is called Brave. It's a big bombastic, Celtic feeling movie that really just didn't live up to everything that came before it in terms of Pixar and all the hype about it, and just the imagery, and the archery had no role. She was an archer for like no reason. You know, like she wanted to change her fate to nothing that we could figure out, you know, and it was just, I just felt really, really disappointed that Pixar, it, you know what it felt like? It felt like a script, like a lot of movies do, that was rushed, and which is not true, because they've been working on this script for years. I don't know if it just changed hand too many times, but
So underwhelmed by it. It felt like a better made Disney CGI film. It was not
Yeah.
Pixar quality. All the music was fantastic.
all right. Well, last but not least is Dark Knight Rises. And again, the reason I wanted to talk, I'll try to keep this, I'll rein myself in on this one, but I want to talk about this one too, because it was, for me, it was just a huge disappointment. But why don't you guys go first? So, Chris, how did you feel about it?
I've honestly shifted since I saw it twice, and I've shifted so many times since then. Just to quickly sum it up, I think the first movie was a good, really good kind of coming of age, dramatic action movie. The second movie was a really brilliant crime noir drama, but both of the first two movies and the third movie, they were like all of Nolan's Batman movies were just kind of imperfect masterpieces. They had, in some ways, they were great movies, but they had kind of basic plot holes, character flaws, story flaws. But in some ways, if you could slightly look past that for a second, you could enjoy the movie as a whole. And I feel like the third movie had those same problems. I think the movie didn't overcome the third movie curse in a way. And if anything, it kind of felt like almost the most obvious comic book-like movie of all of these movies that were supposed to be supposedly transcending the idea of a basic comic book movie. But, I mean, that said, there was, I was kind of swept up in the overall mythical, thematic resolution of everything. I got caught up in Gotham crumbling, even though it should have definitely crumbled more. And I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to go into longer detail on it, but I maybe would have said it a third time, but it wasn't. It could have definitely been better. There were parts of it I really liked. There were parts of it I wasn't a huge fan of.
Dave?
There were obvious problems with the plot of the movie. I was entertained. I wasn't sucked into it as much as the second one. And the first one had its own thing for making Batman. How I grew up with Batman. I followed him, not the older generations of Batman people. Some of them didn't like the newer Batman because they're not used to the Dark Knight, the darker Batman, which our generation was brought up in. Honestly, as much as I loved the second one, I did find the plot of it a bit fumbly. Like there wasn't plot to a lot of it. It was a fantastic work of genius. I felt a little bit of fumbling of the plot like I did with this one. The Bane is Bane. I don't really remember him too much from the comics, just from I know the plot of the whole breaking of Batman and the pseudo Batman guy that came after him went crazy. All I remember of Bane is him being he took some sort of insane type of new steroid thing, got huge and strong. I don't remember. And then I hear about he let all the classic bad guys out, and Batman had to fight them. So Bane is genius like Batman is. Bane is also one of Batman always has best villains, and Bane was the best new villain of the Batman world. I was actually thinking about this last night. I might be dreaming, but I was kind of wondering. I felt like the whole feel of the Batman trilogy changed when they decided to film the majority of it in New York City. Although Gotham was always a bit modeled after in a noir New York City, it was interesting how they made it in Chicago for the first two, but it seemed like too abrupt of a change. Suddenly it's a New York City feel. And the shots in New York are a bit too obvious, I think, that it didn't seem like a mythical city so much as as Manhattan, obviously. I wasn't like super inspired by the part of being in prison, but I have to watch it. I did, but I did enjoy it. I did enjoy. I was very very skeptical about how Catwoman would have been created, and I actually liked her here. I know I'm not looking for realism or something a bit more believable than like was for the '90s films. It's sure painful. I liked her character a lot. I think she was very good. She had these like futuristic glasses. Like, where'd that come from?
That's on the editing room floor somewhere. Like they must have cut some scenes out because, yeah, she just shows up with that costume and those glasses. Like, okay.
At least they tried to do something weird where like the cast, brought her back to life and when she's Catwoman, like the Batman Returns.
Yeah.
She was just kind of like a girl from a rough area who was a burglar. And I really liked how they did it right where Catwoman was always, she's a bad girl. She's a femme fatale, and they did that. They really did that. But she was always, never knew if she was completely good or not, and sometimes she seemed good, and
She's just more out for herself, it wasn't good or bad.
She reminds me of Faye from Cowboy Bebop, the anime.
Yeah, totally.
The classic femme fatale. Super beautiful, but kind of bad, really bad, and attitude.
Well, and she uses her beauty to her advantage.
Oh yeah, and her intentions are always ambiguous, Classic character, an archetype.
I felt like she was the best written character of the movie, and is unfortunate for her character, which I thought was so superb, was her stupid motivation of like wanting to get her. Well, her motivation wasn't bad. It was the plot of like she wanted to get that flash drive that would like wipe her digital presence or something, which is so stupid. I can't believe the Nolans.
It was a blatant Deus Ex Machina. Yeah.
It was so bad. I can't believe that the Nolans would actually put that on film. Like,
it was like the compendium of Avatar.
I didn't really bother me, but I'm not as much of a story guy as you two.
You know what, Dave? I think you are. You just don't. You're not conscious about it. But I do think that most people are actually story people. They're just more unconscious. But
Batman, Bruce Wayne was. I mean, he's supposed to be a troubled guy, but I don't know what. I honestly don't know what to think about. I just wanted to see the whole Batman thing ended with now being like a complete failure. So the fact that it wasn't like this horrible letdown to me made me give it the benefit of the doubt with all its flaws in the plot and everything. I just didn't feel the need. I still think about like what do I think about that movie, and it definitely and I felt like it was going to be the weakest of the three. I really did. Like how could it?
How could it not be? Yeah.
I was kind of expecting the weakest of the three, but at least a good sort of feel of the other two. Just Christopher Nolan's Batman, Dark Knight. As long as it had that vibe, I wasn't going to have any big issues with it. Cool. I felt like it's good. Like, okay, do this. Whatever house movie is, just do it and end it before you start to get a ton of sequels and completely ruin it. So, me personally, it was the weakest of the three, but I still like and respect it with its decent amount of flaws that could easily be nitpicked. So, what I have to say on that.
Well, for my portion, let me just kind of like redirect some questions back at you then, because I have more questions about it than I do like feelings, because like I kind of mirror your kind of like shoulder shrugging about it, because I don't know how to feel about a lot of it. And I would love to talk to Christopher Nolan about some of this, because I really feel in the end that like it was just a very sloppily, lazily written script that had a lot of really, really good ideas and a lot of really good stuff that they quite like just didn't develop enough, or just didn't know what to do with, or didn't have time for, or whatever. But like, I'm gonna say in general, I thought this was incredibly, I think bloated is a good word, some of this movie for my take. It was just bloated with characters and bloated with plot and bloated with stuff that just didn't, I thought like if you pulled a lot of that stuff away, for instance, some things I think they could have simplified it easily. I thought they could have cut Catwoman, even though I thought she was great, and she could have been her own movie, but I thought they
he didn't want to originally use her From what I heard, it was
Oh,
DC
God,
Comics
really?
that were like, you need to put her in.
Well, okay, so then in that regard, they did a much better job of shoving a character in that they didn't want, as opposed to like putting Venom in Spider-Man 3 or whatever.
Same exact scenario. Raimi had no interest in using him. Marvel was like, you need to put him in. The fans want him.
But I thought they could have cut her, and they could have cut Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who was the other character that I thought was almost as good as her. I thought he was the more interesting character too. Oh no, wait, I take it back. No, they could have cut Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, and they could have had Gary Oldman do all of the investigating that they needed Joseph Gordon-Levitt to do, and then in the meantime, I thought they could have left Bruce Wayne or Batman dying at the end ambiguous, and that Catwoman would resurface as Batgirl. And then then they would have killed two birds with one stone. They could have ended Bruce Wayne's story like they wanted to, and then they could have had the new superhero, the whole like the icon, the symbol take over, but not the person, which is the theme they wanted to do, which I thought worked. Like, I thought that was cool.
Right.
I thought that was actually the strongest theme of the movie, was the whole idea of Batman as a symbol, which as a through line for all the movies, I thought that was the strongest thing that held up. But I thought that having Catwoman come up would have been really interesting, more so because then we found out at the end that, of course, that Joseph Gordon-Levitt was Robin. But then it's sort of like, well, is he going to just be Robin? Is he going to be Nightwing? Or is he going to take up as Batman in this world? And, I thought it would have been more, like, Catwoman could have kind of easily become Batgirl, and then she would have still kept the symbol, and then you wouldn't have had to deal with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, who just felt so tacked on, even though I thought he was a good character. And then also, like, having Bane there was fine, but then having the girl, Ra's al Ghul's daughter, show up like as a twist, which I know they took from the comic books in a way, but like it just felt like totally unnecessary. They just didn't do anything with that, and for her being like doing what she was doing, and being like the person above Bane and kind of driving the whole plot of the the bad guy plot, like raises so many questions about like who she was and how she was able to, like, her resources, and like if the League of Shadows and like what they were really after. And so my question to you guys though is like I asked you guys before, is what was her true motivation? I think that, like, if that was ever answered, that would actually make this a good or bad film in my eyes in terms of the story.
You're very right on this point, Dan. You're very right. I don't know.
Well, and to me that's what kind of ruined the film for me, was that it was very ambiguous, like, but we needed to know that because her motivation is what drove the whole film. She set this whole thing up. She's the reason that Batman needed to come back. So for her motivation, or her motivation to be like ill-defined, kind of like made the rest of the movie inconsequential or just confusing. Because it was one or two things. It was she was really believed in the League of Shadows and her father's work, and she really felt like Gotham needed to be obliterated, but we never saw any evidence, especially in this film, that there was any problem with Gotham. It would seem like a fine place to be, especially because Batman fixed all the crime, and so with that in mind, her other motivation then would have been out of pure revenge, that Batman killed her daughter and she wanted him to suffer and then die. But we were never really sure if that's the case, and if that's the case, why did they send him to a prison where everybody was nice to him? So it just didn't hold up. Like, both, it could have been one or the other, but then there wasn't evidence for either. You know what I mean? So like in that regard, that the whole plot of the movie was okay. So to go back to what Dave said, like as a film, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Like it had really interesting flakes of a theme that never really kindled into a fire or whatever, but like I thought there was a lot to enjoy about it. But then when you step back and look at it as a film,
right,
it just made no sense, like in my mind. I thought there were some other like big plot holes of, like, again, like the whole overarching bad guy plot that was driving the action was that they would blow up the city in 5 months, and we come to learn that it was going to happen either way, but the people of Gotham didn't know that. Then we learned that the reason they waited so long was because they wanted Bruce to watch Gotham fall, because she wanted to break his spirit and his hope before they killed him. But if they were going to kill him and everybody in Gotham anyway, what did it matter? Why did that matter at all? Why didn't they just kill everybody all at once and just save themselves the trouble? Like, that just didn't make any sense to me at all. And if it really was to have him lose hope, like, he was hopeless at the beginning of the movie. He had no hope. So, and Bane even says before he breaks him, he's like, your mind is broken, or, like, you were broken before I got here, or whatever. So, again, like, kind of like Brave, like, where are the stakes for Bruce? Like, there was nothing for him to lose starting out. Like, you can't have a character with nothing to lose. And then when, like, the one thing he lost, which was supposed to be really emotional, when Alfred left, I mean, Alfred just quit. Like, he didn't die. So I didn't really feel like that was that big a deal. It was like he could have came back on board easily. I don't know. Like, the emotional weight of stuff didn't really have any weight to me. It just, what I was left with at the end was, like, I thought it was kind of an enjoyable film when you don't think about it too much. But then, like, I really didn't care about anything that happened, and I just wasn't into the characters, except for the ones that didn't really matter, like Robin and Catwoman. I thought they were interesting, but they weren't really central characters that had much to do with the actual plot. They were just sidekicks, that were kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So,
a few last thoughts. I wouldn't say that Gotham was a great place to live at the outset of the film, because it was essentially this kind of ambiguous supposed police state where everything they achieved was through underhanded means. But at the same time, we never saw the full extent of that, nor did we see the full extent of Bane dragging the city down into, chaos, darkly as we saw it in the first one or the second one.
Right.
And also the main thing, what did Talia al Ghul, what was her main motive? I've been reading this graphic novel that's like it was definitely a collection put out in anticipation of the movie that collects, like, I think, like 2 decades worth of, like, 5 stories of Batman versus, like, Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul, and the emotional spectrum she has for Batman across these multiple decade stories, where, like, when she first meets him, she's attracted to him, but she doesn't want to betray her father and her father's ideal, which she sincerely believes in, to the point where she fully loves him, and she realizes that her father is a truly evil person, and they have a child together, but then the child dies supposedly, and then by the end she's fully committed to her father's vision again. But you also know that she has a bitterness over the son that she thinks that she lost, that was her and Bruce Wayne's. They tried to take all of that and compress it into 5 minutes of movie.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work. That's all there is to it. It just didn't work.
Yeah, it is kind of aggravating, because I feel like the Nolans had a lot of opportunity to kind of tell a simpler story, but I think they got so caught up with, and there's so much material in the Batman universe, that they felt like they wanted to pull a lot of things. Like, they wanted the Ra's al Ghul stuff, they wanted a little bit of No Man's Land, which I think is like one of the finest works of Batman's tales, but they never really got to explore any of it with any real substance or depth, so it kind of made all of it inconsequential in the end, like.
I still wonder how much of it was, like, DC pressuring them, you need to do this, you need to do that. I mean, even from the second one, it's like, with Two-Face, they had a potential, he could have been the main villain for the third one.
Absolutely. Well, but at least we have those films now, and we can completely forget about the Joel Schumacher films.
Can always watch the cartoon again.
And yes, like you said, yeah, at least we have the animated series, which is definitely the finest Batman work ever put on screen.
Lastly, here's an excerpt from our then final episode of Musicast, before I have now resurrected it, that was published on March 11th, 2013. It was my recognition of my favorite film from 2012.
On our last review, I want to do is not a review of an album, but of a movie, and we can just touch on it for a second. I just want to recognize it because like the last time we talked about movies. I feel like we talked about movies that I personally had really high expectations for, and they all let me down in one way or another. And so I just want to quickly talk about a movie that is not only like, to me, like the most enjoyable movie that I've seen in a long time, and just really kept me guessing because I had no idea. Like, I had heard about its twists, and I'd heard that like things that you wouldn't expect happen, but I didn't know what to expect. So it was a movie that I walked into with like no expectations, and it totally blew me away. And like my only criticism of it, before I even tell you what it is that it's not quite a movie that I think I would watch over and over again, because like you know, movies that I'm more emotionally attached to, only because like the movie was more of like a tongue in cheek, like, hey, look what we can do, you know, kind of movie, as opposed to being a real engaging story with a really interesting characters that you like stick to you and speak to you and stuff like that. But I thought Cabin in the Woods was by far the best movie I've seen in years. And I just wanted to recognize that, because I don't know, like, I don't feel, and I think the biggest reason it was because it took a huge risk on being a piece of crap. But Joss Whedon and his counterpart that helped him with it, for that other guy, I was super impressed, because I thought it ran the risk of being awful and really cliche and generic, which was obviously what they were playing with. But then Joss Whedon was just so clever, and he took it in a totally different direction than I thought it was going to go. And it became like this, you know, it just kept snowballing into this bigger and bigger movie with like higher and higher stakes, to the point that like it was so over the top that obviously it was meant to be funny, but it was also like, I was just impressed by less about what was actually happening in the movie, and more by like what the filmmakers were doing with it. Like it felt totally like a huge I don't know, like, what, you know, breaking the fourth wall. Like they were really, it was really kind of like, again, kind of like Muse doing the dubstep. This is very similar to me, with that kind of like a wink, you know, or a nod at the audience, of being like, you know, hey, look what we can do. You know, we can do what everybody else does, and then do it way better. And that just really impressed me. Like, that to me, that it was just so fresh and refreshing as a film, because films just don't take chances. You know, like Batman. I thought, or even, and then like the Matrix movies and stuff. Like they started out, they could have been so unique and like original, if they had just taken a risk and not worried about keeping things conventional. But then they, you know, both of those franchises wrapped up like really kind of trite, I thought. But then Cabin in the Woods was just like, it just showed that you can make something great if you're just honest, and you just take a risk and have fun. Like, you tell they're having so much fun with it, you know? So what did you think of that movie?
That was great. It did hit me on the level. It hit you, I think, like a film thing with you.
Yeah, well, no, it definitely, well, like I was paying attention to like all of it, like the direction and the screenwriting and the pacing, and you know, and just the you know, all that the behind the scenes stuff I was way more interested in than the actual like stuff that was happening on the screen. Even though I thought that was great too, but you know.
Well, it's kind of very unique and creative, funny, entertaining. You know, it was great. The nightmare creatures. It was like almost a parody of it. You know.
Totally.
It was like, well, you know, they all have like this one nightmare creature. We have them all.
Exactly. That's why I thought it was so great.
Why does this whatever underground government group, whatever, have like just randomly have every nightmare creature imaginable.
Well, isn't that interesting? Like, think of all the stories you could tell with in this world. Well, not now that the world's destroyed, you can't. But that you could have told, like about people that work for the company that have to gather up these characters. Like, you could have made a whole movie off of that.
But I love the line at the end where the guy's like, they're both gonna die, the world's gonna end, and whatever. And he's like, so big angry gods, huh?
Yeah. Well, and even up until the end, it kept you guessing because they just kept twisting it because you didn't think that, like, he was actually gonna let her. He was actually gonna shoot her, and then he was going to, and then he was like, and then immediately he was like, sorry about that. It's just like it was so perfect because in movies, like, you always want the good guy to, like, he has the chance, he has the gun to the bad guy's head, and he never takes the chance. He's not going to. But but this was like, it did everything that you wanted the movie to do, but you didn't expect it to, and I just thought that was brilliant. So, Joss Whedon, that guy's great, and I'm looking forward to Avengers 2 and everything.
Be sure to visit breathingunderwater.us. Follow me on Instagram at breathingunderwater1 and drop me a line at breathingunderwater1@gmail.com. Please note that I do not claim any ownership of any media presented in this podcast, which is only used for promotional purposes unless otherwise noted, and all views and opinions are those of the person expressing them and do not represent any other entities discussed in this podcast.